Nobody wants to think that they're being influenced 24/7. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your point of view, we are. It's no surprise that advertisements are everywhere. You can't get on your phone or go outside without getting bombarded by someone trying to sell you something. And the same goes for our entertainment. Real quick, let's put a definition to the difference between themes and messages. Themes are an overall topic that you're going to discuss. Things like friendship, love, war. The message is what you're saying about those themes. So, what do you believe about love? What's the reader going to take away about love? What are they going to take away about friendship? What are you saying about war? That's going to be the ultimate message, and that comes from the way your story unfolds. I don't want themes, you might say. While that might be something we wish could happen, it's just not possible. Any good story worth reading is going to have some sort of theme in it, whether it's themes of friendship, love, overcoming fears, they're going to be there. And how the story unfolds is your message about it. What is your message about friendship? How your story unfolds determines what you're saying about friendship. Same thing with love. What is your message about love? Is it self sacrificing? Is it possessive? Themes are everywhere and there's nothing we can do about it. Stories are inherently messages. It's how they've been used throughout human history and it's how it continues to be used. As a reader or a writer, this is something that you should be aware of if you're not already. And it's something that you need to be cognizant about when you're writing. If you're saying to yourself right now, I don't have messages in my story, I'm afraid to tell you they're still there. You just don't realize it. It goes all the way back to the beginning of time when humans would tell tales to one another. Let's take Aesop's Fables, for example. These are your classic folk tales with animals as the main characters doing human things. Aesop's Fables existed even before the time of Jesus, and they're there to teach moral lessons. These stories are the classics like The Tortoise and the Hare. Sometimes slow and steady wins the race. Or The Lion and the Mouse. If you help other people, they can turn around and help you too. The Town Mouse and the Country Mouse. Sometimes what you have already is better than what someone else has, even if it looks glamorous. These are all examples of stories with messages. Just take a look at children's books. They're the most blatant examples of messages. A lot of the times, children's books are about sharing, they're about friendship, or accepting other people. It would be hard to get a traditional deal for a children's book if you don't have some sort of goal for the book besides entertainment. Even Dr. Seuss books, which are often very silly, have a purpose behind it, whether it's to help kids sound words out, even if they're nonsense words, or it covers a topic about environmentalism. Even our most silly books have a point to them. What makes books so unique compared to other forms of entertainment, like movies and shows, is that the reader really gets to get inside the character. They get to be the main character, whether it's written in first person or third. And so it allows the reader to become the person and experience what they are experiencing. And what does this help a reader do? It helps build empathy. It helps them understand other people besides themselves, which is why a diverse bookshelf is important because you don't want to just hear stories from people just like you. You want to be able to walk in the shoes of other people. So, as a writer, you can be aware of this and think about the experiences you want others to understand. One great example of a story that was impactful for really the whole world was the narrative life of Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass he's the writer, but he's also the main character. And it's written like a story, outlining his life as a slave and his quest for freedom. And this story was used a lot in the abolition of slavery. It was very influential because what it did was humanize slaves And it made people realize that the slaves were just like them. And so this is one great example of how stories can influence mindsets on the individual level, but as well as policy. And there are so many stories out there that have changed individuals, have changed society, and have changed policy. And that is the amazing power of stories. And so keeping that in mind, we have to be aware of what we're writing because whether we want it to be or not, stories are a very powerful thing. A quote by Seneca says that stories are a means through which values, culture, and meaning are articulated. If you want to learn a lot about a culture, especially in ancient cultures that we're disconnected to, just read their stories. You'll learn a lot about the values that they had and their way of life. Another good thing about messages and themes and why they're good, they help people learn how to navigate life. Cognitive psychologist Keith Oatley says that fiction is the mind's flight simulator. So, in case you don't know much about pilots and how they learn, they do flight simulation, which is basically kind of like a video game to learn how to land a plane before they ever get in a real one. What this means is that fiction helps people navigate circumstances that they're going through or that they haven't even gone through yet. But having read those stories and read how people interact and the consequences of the actions that these characters take, people are better able to gauge situations that could happen in the future. And this is kind of why after school specials were a big thing, especially when I was a kid. And the episodes always covered stuff that kids may be going through or may go through in life, whether they were tackling friendship issues, racism, prejudices, environmental issues, or even things like a family divorce. These programs help kids navigate those issues and understand their feelings. And just like those after school specials, all stories do the same, but they get more complicated as the target audience is older and older. Fiction helps people cope with the tragedies of life, and this is part of that flight simulator. I know from my own personal experience as a child, I didn't have a lot of really good role models, and I found this a lot in heroes in books. It's which I really like high fantasy, and I love Noble Bright because those were people I could look up to as a kid and be like, ah, I want to be like that when I'm older. And as a writer, this is a big influence you can have on people. You can give them light, you can give them good examples, and then you can give them cautionary tales. You can give them those bad examples. You can help people navigate life, which is why we have to take our messages and our stories seriously. Are there any books or any other kind of stories out there that helped you navigate life at some point, whether it was when you were a kid or adult? If so, please share your story. Fiction also teaches us about our emotions and how damaging things like revenge and unforgiveness can be. And so, as a Christian, that's why I want to be very cognizant about the messages ultimately that I'm sending. I'm not going to show revenge as a good thing. I'm not going to show unforgiveness as a good thing. While, yes, those should be oftentimes present in a story, the message of it should be that it's not good. We should see why it becomes a bad thing. And when it comes to themes and the messages, speculative fiction is often really good about this. What makes speculative fiction so unique in this area is that we can take real world problems and put them in a fantasy setting and kind of reskin the issue, make it look a little bit different to help remove the biases that people are already carrying with them. So, especially, okay, things like racism or prejudices, we can come up with a very unique fantasy prejudice that to the outsider might seem kind of silly, but it's present in that world. And what it helps show is that prejudice ultimately are not really based in logic. And we can do this without having to bring the world baggage in. You can tackle socio-political issues in a really great way in a fantasy setting or even a sci-fi setting. You can take the core issues that different groups might be warring over, and you don't have to name those groups. You take the issue and you show it through a fresh lens without any of those identities, any of those labels, or those biases that come with it. And you can just show the issue through the narrative in a completely different lens. And it helps people take a step back and reassess their own beliefs and whether it's good or not. So, us as Christians, we need to be very careful about the messages that we put in our stories because not all stories are used for good. We would like to think that all of the messages being sent to us in our entertainment is going to make us better people, but that's simply not true, especially in today's world. Some stories revel in gore and violence and revenge. Those go completely against biblical principles. We know we're supposed to forgive and we're not supposed to take vengeance. So we don't want our stories to end up glorifying those. Are we saying that revenge is good? Are we saying that doing bad things for the right reasons is good? We see that morally gray is very popular right now. And we have to ask ourselves, is that the kind of message we really want to send? Would we want people to actually do bad things for the right reasons? Is it ever justified? As Christians, we really need to be biblically based when we're coming up with these messages. Another great thing about messages and themes is that we can use that to glorify God's principles without being preachy. We can show why these principles exist. What are the consequences of revenge? How does it hurt the character that actually sought revenge? How does it hurt the people around them? What does unforgiveness look like? How does that hurt the people around them? A great example of a book that really shows the downsides to unforgiveness is called The Dutch House. The basic premise of the story is that a man remarries after his wife leaves him. The brother and the sister of the original marriage are not favored by their stepmother, who also has kids. They're ultimately kicked out of the house and left without an inheritance. And the older sister of these two siblings never let this hurt go. The story follows them from childhood to adulthood, and you see how her not forgiving or letting go of the hurt their stepmother caused them, she ruined her whole life and messed up part of her brother's life as well. And it's a really good example of how unforgiveness really just hurts the person who hasn't forgiven more than it does anyone else. The stories that we write can also help people through times of hardship. Once again, a quote by Seneca: connecting with our own or other stories of strength and resilience in the face of social upheaval, war, and trauma can be an antidote to what otherwise be internalized sense of powerlessness, depression, fear, and even shame. Basically, stories can give people hope. I know as a kid, I really enjoyed stories that were hopeful because they gave me hope to keep going and to keep striving and to keep being good. And that's an amazing power that writers have. Alternatively, you can also cause hopelessness. If you're writing stories that show that life is futile, that there is no hope, or that all of our efforts go to waste, that can leave readers feeling hopeless. Because oftentimes this world is really hard, which is why we need to create those hope spots. And I'm not saying you can't tackle hard issues or make a story with a semi-sad ending, but there needs to be a hope spot within that story. Perhaps the character has done something that will leave a lasting good impact on future generations. There needs to be hope spots. So as we said, that fiction increases empathy and helps people understand others. Now, here's the point that I want all you Christians to listen to. This also applies to God. So, especially in our fantasy worlds that we're writing, we need to be aware of how we are portraying God and any godlike entities in a book. So, what are you saying about God through your speculative fiction work? And I could do a whole video on this one because there's so many good and bad examples, and it's something that we really, really need to be aware of. We don't want to give people the wrong impression about who God is. Now, I'm not saying you can't have a corrupted religion or you can't have any sort of evil entities, but if you are your ultimate creator, really shouldn't be evil. Because people, whether they realize it or not, are going to equate that to God. So don't do it, Christians. And believe me, if you think that, oh, one story's not going to hurt, I'm telling you, there's plenty of people already writing those stories. and we have no part in participating in that. So by all means, have false evil gods. That's fine. Have, a religion that's been corrupted that needs to be corrected. Do that. But don't make your ultimate creator in your fantasy world evil. Now, I would say there's probably some wiggle room here if you have a polytheistic god setup, because we see over and over again with Greek gods and the Norse gods and the Egyptian gods, there's always some sort of chaotic nonsense going on there. And what made Christianity so unique is that we had a monotheistic God, so we only have one. We don't have all these other gods that are in charge of other little things. So if you're creating a monotheistic God, people automatically associate that with the Judeo-Christian God. This also goes back to the importance of not rushing through your story and publishing it immediately. Get feedback of people who are looking for the messages. Ask what people are getting out of it, because you don't want to send messages out there in your stories that are harmful. An easy look at this, the Twilight series, all right? There's no denying that that book was extremely popular. They made movies, they made lots of money. But the problem is we had themes of relationship and love, right? But the message behind that, what were the messages? We have a man who was basically stalking a girl, watching her sleep through her window before they even were going out. Situations like that are creating bad messages. And I absolutely don't think that was intentional. I don't think Stephenie Meyer believes that men should be able to stalk women. But the problem is that was in the book, and the way it's portrayed that sends that message. So have people read your stories. Have them be picky. Have them dissect what kind of themes and messages are in there, and really consider if it really is sending that message and if that's a message you want to be sent. So what do you think? Are you intentional about the messages and themes that you put in your stories? Do you wish that we didn't have to worry about them? Maybe you completely disagree with me. Maybe you think it's possible to have a good story with 0 messages. Let me know. If you have messages that you want to send, but you're not really sure how to do it without being preachy, check out my next video.